Of all the animals on Earth, only one cries emotional tears. No other animal on the planet weeps from grief, joy, or frustration. Scientists have puzzled over this for over a century and still argue about it. But ancient humans, sitting around fires long before science existed, had already figured out what tears were for. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for roughly 200,000 years. For almost all of that time, there were no books, no labs, no words for emotions at all. Yet they observed, they interpreted, and they responded to tears in ways that turn out to be exactly right. First, you need to know that humans actually produce 3 completely different kinds of tears. Reflex tears are the ones that happen when your eyes get irritated by smoke, wind, or a freshly cut onion. Basal tears are the continuous lubricating film your eyes produce every second of every day just to keep working. And then there are emotional tears, the ones that flow when you are overwhelmed by something that matters. A third type, emotional tears, exists in no other species on Earth. Dogs whimper. Elephants show grief behaviors, but none of them shed actual tears from emotion. Scientists have spent decades trying to figure out why emotional tears exist at all. Charles Darwin wrote about emotional expression in 1872 and was genuinely baffled by human tears. He literally called weeping one of the most puzzling expressions he had ever encountered. The next 150 years, researchers proposed theory after theory. Most of them were discarded within a generation. So let's actually answer it. Start 60,000 years ago, somewhere in Africa, around a fire after a loss. One member of the group is in pain, and the group can see it because of the tears. Now imagine that same person showing no outward sign of pain whatsoever. The group around him cannot tell what he needs or whether they can trust him. Tears are a social signal. They communicate vulnerability instantly and involuntarily. When you cry in front of someone, you're doing 3 things simultaneously without a single word. You are declaring, I am vulnerable, I am not attacking you, and I need connection right now. Ancient Mesopotamian texts from 4,000 years ago describe weeping as a mark of deep sincerity. In Sumerian religious texts, a king who wept before the gods was displaying genuine devotion, not weakness. And a person who did not cry at a funeral was viewed with suspicion. What were they hiding? They understood intuitively what researchers would later confirm. Tears invite comfort. In 2001, researcher Ad Vingerholtz published the most comprehensive study of human crying ever conducted. His findings confirmed something ancient peoples had lived by for millennia. Crying actually works, but only in the right conditions. You cry in the presence of a trusted person. Something measurable happens in your body. Your cortisol levels drop, your heart rate slows, and your brain releases oxytocin. The biological result is a genuine calming effect. Your nervous system downshifts. But here is the crucial thing Vingerholtz found. This only reliably works when you're not alone. Crying alone, in study after study, tends to make people feel worse, not better. Tears are at their biological core a distress call, one that bypasses language entirely. Before our ancestors had words for, I am suffering, they had tears to say it for them. The social theory of crying now has the strongest evidence base of any competing explanation. Ancient peoples punished those who couldn't or wouldn't cry at the right moments because they read it as dishonesty. In ancient Mesopotamia, a leader who cried was trusted, and one who never cried was feared. Greek philosophers saw public weeping as a civic virtue. Tears proved a man's soul was engaged. Aristotle coined the term catharsis, the emotional purging that tragedy induced in an audience through pity and tears. Greeks wept together in amphitheaters and considered it a form of collective spiritual hygiene. They understood crying in community as something that bound people together and made them more resilient. 2,000 years before the first neuroscience lab opened, they had the mechanism right. Across every culture, in every era, humans have responded to tears with the impulse to help. Emotional crying has been documented in every human culture on Earth, without a single exception. So if tears are a social signal, why do people sometimes cry completely alone? Your brain, it turns out, does not draw a sharp line between a real and an imagined social audience. That is why you cry at fictional characters in films. Your nervous system responds as if they are real. And this brings us to another thing ancient peoples knew that science later confirmed. Tears are extraordinarily difficult to fake convincingly. Most people can tell the difference between genuine emotional tears and a performance almost instantly. Studies show that observers can identify fake crying from genuine crying with remarkable accuracy. Ancient courts knew this. A leader who cried too easily or at the wrong moments lost credibility fast. The most powerful use of tears across history has always been communal grief, crying together after a loss. Funeral rites that include communal weeping appear in nearly every culture ever studied by anthropologists. And one of the most fascinating findings is that witnessing someone cry can trigger tears in the observer. Mirror neuron systems mean that your brain literally rehearses the emotional state of the person you are watching. This is why a film can make an entire theater full of strangers cry simultaneously. You are not alone in that darkness. You are in a ritual as old as the Greek amphitheater. Now let's demolish the idea that has caused more unnecessary suffering than almost any other cultural myth. The idea that crying is weak, shameful, or childish is a culturally constructed myth, and a historically recent one. For most of human history, crying in public, even for men, was considered honorable and appropriate. It was specifically during the 18th and 19th centuries in Europe that male crying became coded as weakness. Industrialization rewarded emotional suppression. A factory floor needed controlled workers, not expressive ones. The culture that stigmatized male tears was built for economic efficiency, not human well-being. The body keeps the score, as researchers now say, and suppressed grief has physical consequences. Ancient people knew this too. In most early cultures, grief had to be expressed communally and openly to heal. In Mesopotamia, professional mourners were hired to cry at funerals. Their tears seeded the community's release. It encoded in ritual what science would only map neurologically thousands of years later. Match is not a coincidence. It is what happens when behavior evolves over hundreds of thousands of years. Behaviors that persist for 200,000 years do so because they work. Crying kept early humans socially bonded through loss, trauma, and the unrelenting pressure of survival. Tears signal to others, I am in this moment fully, honestly, without armor. And that may be the most human thing of all. Language, music, laughter, and tears. These are the things that separate us from every other species. And the science now suggests that tears may be the oldest of these, older than language, older than music. Before the first word was ever spoken, a tear may have been the most powerful signal one human could send another. You are saying, I trust you enough to let you see this, which is the oldest invitation to connection that exists. Ancient humans understood this long before anyone wrote it down, and they built their rituals around it. Science did not discover why humans cry. It finally caught up to what our species has always known.